and welcome to Get Rich Slow, the podcast that challenges the conventional get rich quick ideology and instead explores what authentic success really means and how you can achieve it. I'm Hannah Martin, the founder of Talented Ladies Club, and today I'm joined by Natasha Minchella from the Orchard Legal Hub, who's also known as the least lawyery lawyer, that's a bit of a tongue twister, for an episode on legal contracts. And I promise you this episode is going to be more interesting than you probably think now I've just said that. Thank you, Natasha. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, hi, Hannah. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming on. So before we talk about legal stuff, can I just ask what success means to you personally?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me personally, success means being able to dictate and make choices around what my day looks like day to day. And it was very much that in the early days. Subsequently, it's become what my week looks like and what my month looks like as my business has evolved. But that, when I'm having a tricky time, I just think, well, look how you're managing to structure your day and intentionally choose what you're doing. And that means everything to me.
Excellent. I can totally relate to that, and very similar motivations to have my own business. So obviously you have your own business now. What's your professional background? What did you do before and how did you get to where you are?
So I always say that I'm a creative person who accidentally became a corporate lawyer in the city. And it sounds like an unlikely thing to happen, but I think probably a lot of people will relate to that. So I was an arts student. I had a really strong academic background, but I just didn't know what to do with it. And I always felt like the people who did the really creative jobs, there was something very special or magical about them that I probably didn't have. I now don't think that's true, by the way. But because of that, I wasn't sure, and I decided to give the law a go. I got a job in a great international city law firm in London, and I did my training there. And I'm so fortunate that I did my training there. I'm very grateful for that. I met some wonderful people, and I had fantastic training and experience. But I always felt like people wear a corporate mask, what I call a corporate mask in that environment. I didn't feel completely at home. And, I used to get described as the hippie lawyer, and they thought I was the eccentric one. I used to think, oh my gosh, you have no idea. This is me trying to fit in. This isn't the real me at all. But that's my professional background. So I have always worked helping businesses, from blue chip companies right down to where I am now, helping small businesses, which is what I love doing. But that's my professional background. And I did that, I worked in traditional law firms for probably nearly 20 years, quite a long time. And then I got to the stage where I thought, I can't do this anymore. It's sucking the soul out of me, sucking the marrow out of my bones. This is just not working. And at that stage, I decided to hand in my notice, give up my secure, safe corporate legal job and set up on my own, start my own business. And that was about 7 years ago.
Excellent. So that's quite an unusual path to go from art to law. But I totally understand that what you have is different, because you probably were able to look at things from a different perspective than someone who's just trained their entire life for that profession.
Absolutely. And that's what my clients really appreciate about me now, and that's why I get called the least lawyery lawyer, because I just approach things in quite an unusual way for a commercial contracts corporate type lawyer, and I see things and I talk about things in a more creative way, which the kind of creative business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs, I think most entrepreneurs actually are creative souls. I'm not saying that they spend the weekend painting, but they're creative souls, and so they really appreciate approach law in that kind of way.
And I absolutely agree with that entirely. Very similarly to you, I did a fine art degree. I dropped out, didn't finish it, but I knew I really wanted something creative, and I knew I didn't want to fit in with a kind of very kind of corporate type environment. I wouldn't have done. It would have sucked my soul. But to me, when I was younger, probably a bit like you, creative literally just meant being an artist. Like I had no other knowledge beyond that. I ended up becoming a writer in advertising, which is, you know, obviously very commercial, and loved it. And that is clearly my absolute reason to kind of work. But it's really interesting, the idea that creativity is boxed up in terms of, are you a painter, are you a musician? If you're not creative. Actually, I think it's like at a spectrum. We're all creative to some degree, aren't we? And we can take that into any profession.
Absolutely, and my goodness, if I could go back to, and it makes me a bit teary when I think about it. If I could go back to me, then I'd say, just give it a go, just give it a go. And you know what? My two children. So I've got my daughter Florence is 22. She's just graduated from Goldsmiths. She did theatre studies, and she now works in a really cool prop making company in London, making props for West End shows. I mean, I was talking to her last night. I said, I'm so disappointed, Flo. I really thought you were going to come back home and have to spend 18 months working in a coffee shop, and I'd get you for another 18 months. But she got a job straight away, and she's now working in that creative environment, which I love. And then my son, who's 16, has now ended up becoming an actor. And he just put himself out there. And I think my experience as an entrepreneur, I just encouraged him. I said, you know what, go for it. Put yourself out there, get yourself an agent. And he ended up landing, the lead role in an HBO TV series last year. And he's just about to make the second season. And I think we must remember that those creative opportunities are there all around us, and we can't always become an actor. But you know what? Those jobs within the creative industries are entirely possible. But as entrepreneurs, and building our own businesses, we get to infuse what we do with that creativity. So I'm still ostensibly, I am, a corporate and commercial lawyer. I still have all of that wealth of knowledge and expertise, but I now infuse my daily life with a creative way of doing that. And before, I felt like a square peg in a round hole, or a round peg in a square hole. I never know which way round it is, but that. And now I'm still doing the same type of work, but I'm doing it in a different environment. I'm surrounding myself with other entrepreneurs, business communities that are full of creative people, and my clients are those sorts of businesses and people as well. And so I get to be creative as well as being a corporate lawyer, basically.
Excellent. Oh, I love the story of your children. I love the fact they've both got the courage to pursue the things they really love. Because I think all too often we have dreams and then we talk ourselves out of it. So that's brilliant.
That's because of all of the soul searching. I mean, I'm not going to take credit, because they obviously took the brave decisions to put themselves out there in different ways. But they saw me doing a lot of soul searching, a lot of this kind of self-help type, self-improvement courses and workshops and books and coaches myself. And those things, we can become a little bit used to that idea, when we can even take the mickey out of them a bit and think, but actually those things, there are things that you can take away that are right for you and pass on that really help. And that definitely helped my kids. My entrepreneurial soul searching journey really helped them go for it and put themselves out there.
Excellent. So from children to legal contracts.
Yes.
So why is it important then, speaking as a lawyer, why is it important, if not essential, that we get legally binding contracts if perhaps we're a coach or a consultant or a service-based professional?
Okay, so I always say, if you're selling anything, you need a contract. And that might be an individual contractual agreement in the kind of traditional way of looking at a contract, or it might be your terms and conditions that sit online on your sales page that people tick and agree to. Either way, you need something in place that is binding to help manage and set a really healthy foundation for that relationship with your clients. And The reason that I get so excited about this, and believe me, I'm a really pragmatic lawyer. Like, I don't get really excited and fired up about drafting limitation of liability clauses. I can do it, but that's not what sets me alight. What makes me excited is the transformation I see in small businesses when they get a decent set of terms and conditions or client contract in place that is right for their business, right for their brand and their values, and relevant to what they do. And it all started a couple of years ago. I started to intentionally collect the stories from my clients of their experiences before they got legally sorted and after they got legally sorted. And there were certain things that I expected to come up. So I did expect things to come up like, I feel better now in case things go wrong. I feel better now about my assets being protected, about my liability being limited, about my risk being managed. Those sorts of things that we typically associate with getting our contract sorted. And those things did come up. But my goodness, I was so surprised. There were some really big, chunky, emotional, kind of foundational things that came up. And have come up time and time again since. And I don't really hear people talking about these things very much. But it was things like, I'm really scared of launching. I feel vulnerable. I feel unprofessional. I'm worried that people are going to expect too much. I'm worried that people are going to get confused about what I do. I don't feel able to charge properly for my services. I'm stuck offering my services for free or at a really reduced rate. And I'm telling myself I'm doing it for testimonials. And of course, gathering testimonials in the beta stage is really important. But people get stuck in what I call the beta zone. So they just get stuck doing that again and again and again because they're scared to launch properly, or they're scared to really grab the opportunities that come their way or promote their businesses. And then with all of the things that we know about at the moment, with folk offering, for example, longer payment plans and ability to spread the cost of payment for things, there are worries about unreasonable refund requests, people cancelling, people having unrealistic expectations because they're putting so much emphasis on every single penny they're spending. All of these things can get mopped up in one fell swoop by your client contract or your terms and conditions. And that's why I love it, because I see the change in people in the way they show up in their business, in the way they promote what they're doing, in the conversations that they feel able to have about partnerships and joint ventures and collaborations. And by the way, I think that where we are right now, it's those partnerships and collaborations and those conversations that are going to really help take your business to the next level so that you come out of this tricky time stronger than ever. So I love encouraging people and giving them the confidence to have those conversations. But that's what I get really excited about, seeing the transformation in businesses when they get their contract sorted. And it's so much more than the paperwork. We get tempted to go, the T's and C's, just the paperwork. But the way that makes you feel is so much more than the paperwork.
I guess it's kind of like a professional version of setting your boundaries, isn't it? And
oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah, and if we don't do it in personal relationships, then the risk people can walk all over us. But I wonder if actually also another big part of the confidence isn't just the fact they've put those in place and everyone knows the lay of the land, but by involving a third party, i.e. you, it's almost like you're endorsing that they are right to think that expect those things. Because often I think we might think, I do want people to pay me on time, or I do think that, people, the issue with my payment terms or whatever they might think. But they would think it's just me thinking these things. What if I'm unreasonable? What if that's not something that other people ask for? But when you have a professional person like you who writes or helps them write the contract, it's like you're saying, you are perfectly right to ask for these things, which gives a layer of confidence, because suddenly it's not just them, they've got an ally on side. Do you think that's part of it?
That's a really interesting point. I haven't thought about it in that way before, but I think that's absolutely True. And also in my community, people find an awful lot of reassurance and strength in the fact that they're not the only ones who find this difficult. It is difficult. It's difficult for everybody. And let me tell you, those blue chip companies in those boardrooms having the conversations with those high flying city lawyers, they find it difficult too, but all they do is just chuck a load of cash at it and pretend they know what they're talking about, which, by the way, is why we end up with these contracts that are 70 pages long and full of every single thing in the whole wide world. It's because people are scared to get to grips with what's actually happening at the heart of a contract. So yeah, it is hard to get to grips with this sort of thing. You do need a third person to help you and hold your hand, a kind of trusted organisation at the very least to hold your hand through the process. But having that reassurance that other people struggle with these things, and also having someone to say, yeah, it's entirely reasonable, i.e. me saying entirely reasonable for you to have your contract in place, your terms and conditions. And I think when we really, especially recovering people pleasers, which I'm definitely one of those, but it's difficult when we have our service-based businesses where we are helping people in various ways. Sometimes that stage of saying, right, now I'm going to send you my terms and conditions, now I'm going to send you my contract, can feel like a bit of a kind of obstacle and a bit of a break in the trust. I always describe that as the kind of honeymoon period where you're finishing each other's sentences. It's like falling in love. You can't imagine anything's ever going to go wrong. And then suddenly you're like, you can imagine the kind of romantic music scratching and ending, and then out comes the contract. But it doesn't need to be like that. Remember that your contract and your terms and conditions are there to protect everybody. If they're a good set of terms and conditions, a good contract, they will protect everybody. They'll bring clarity to the relationship. They'll make sure that everybody knows what's happening. But one of the things that's really important is to make sure that your contract is right for your business and is relevant to what you do, and also sounds right for your business. Things like knowing that you haven't got anything unreasonable or really onerous in there, or illegal, or old-fashioned, or overly complicated, or not in alignment with you and your brand. We spend so much time thinking about our branding and our messaging and our customers' pain points and all of those things, and getting our voice right. It's such a shame then if you produce this really antiquated, irrelevant, patchy contract, or one of those contracts that you've got as a sample or from a friend of a friend, which actually ultimately was an American contract, often, sorry American lawyers, but often full of capital letters. I call them shouty contracts. You're never going to feel great about sending that out because you don't really know what it's about. You don't know if it's right for what you're doing, and it doesn't sound like you. So that's the one proviso. But apart from that, when you send out that document, you should feel really proud you're being a responsible business owner. You are bringing clarity to your relationship with your client. It's a really good thing. And quite frankly, if you have anybody signing up for your services who doesn't like the fact that you're sending them a contract, then I think you want to think about whether they're the right sort of client to take on, because they're making an investment in you. And it's good and proper that there are boundaries and policies in place around all of that. So,
and also, as you say, it protects them as well because they know where they stand legally as well. So they know what their rights are. They can choose not to sign that contract, not engage with you if they don't want to, but they are aware of their legal rights and they're protected because without a contract, neither party has that legal protection, do they?
Absolutely. Without a written contract, something that a lot of people don't realise is that without a written contract, there's still a contract there. As soon as you are providing something and someone in return is acting to their detriment, there's some kind of transfer of value. As soon as that happens, there will be a contract in place. And so, but that contract will be made up of a bunch of emails, scraps of conversations, people's memory of scraps of conversations, and it becomes, messy all round. There's something beautiful. I do get a bit geeky about contracts, but there's something beautiful about having a concise, clear document in place that's setting out who's doing what. It's an exchange of energy, basically. A contract is an exchange of energy, and having that all in place. And sometimes you don't realise how wonderful it is until there's a bit of an issue in the relationship. And to be able to take out all of the emotion and the drama and calmly say, okay, well, let's have a look at our service description. Let's have a look at the refund policy. Can I just remind you of what you signed up to? It just feels totally different. Otherwise, you're just stuck in this place of drama and emotion, and it sucks your energy away from the rest of your business. So just knowing where you stand and being able to point your clients towards that document it's a really great feeling.
And what about some of the mistakes? I mean, you just talked about just kind of like taking a long contract that someone else has written and trying to kind of tweak it. But what other mistakes do people make when they are creating contracts for their business or trying to?
Yeah, so it's so difficult because it's heartbreaking, actually. People come to me often and say, oh, I've pulled something together myself. My heart sinks because I know that I've spent hours, very likely, trying to pull something together, trying to make it sound legal, and they just don't hold together. And there will be elements, don't get me wrong, there will be elements that are very specific about their business and their policies that might be great, but it doesn't hold together as a cohesive whole, and therefore it doesn't give them the legal protection they need. But some of the specific mistakes that I see time and time again are there will just be a complete lack of a limitation of liability clause. And that's one of the most crucial types of protection that you can have. And we can't just draft those without knowing what we're doing. Of course we can't. Why would you even know that you need to look out for a limitation of liability clause, or indeed what it needs to do in order for you to be able to rely on it and for it to stand up in court if you ever needed to? That's specialist knowledge, but very often they're just missing. The other thing that people get wrong a lot is not having worked out whether they supply to consumers or not. Because if you supply to consumers, then there's a whole load of consumer protection legislation that we're used to having the benefit of ourselves, of course, when we buy things online. It's particularly when you buy things online. And our clients and customers get that as well. And whenever I do my trainings, there's often a big aha moment for a whole bunch of people that just go, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. Or they've misunderstood what consumer means. And it's such false economy just to ignore that, because inadvertently what you end up doing, if you're supplying to consumers and you don't set out their rights in a contract, they end up getting even more rights. Now, I'm all for consumers having their statutory rights, but I'm also all for protecting our businesses, because my goodness, we need them, our families need them, and the people that we help need them as well, now more than ever. And so we also need to we have a responsibility to our clients. We also have a responsibility to ourselves and our businesses to be doing what is right, and just making sure that we've got the right refund policy and we're not accidentally giving a whole bunch of extra rights to our clients and putting our businesses at exposing them to a whole load of extra risk. We really don't need that right now. So it's just false economy, not getting to grips with that. So that's one of the main things I would say.
And what about, so there's the role of us as the person creating a contract, but also, all of us at times will sign contracts, especially if we ourselves working with a coach, because coaches get coached as well, and freelancers do. So when we're signing contracts other people have written, what should we look out for to make sure we don't sign something that we shouldn't?
Yeah, so this comes up a lot. And so there are a couple of situations, really. So one is just to say, when contracts come your way, and this is a slightly different point, but it's a good point. When contracts come your way because you're providing services to a corporate, firstly, don't always expect that the corporate will have their contract or their terms and conditions together, because often they don't. So it's good to be ready with your own contract. But second, don't let them get away with murder and just, for example, not include a limitation of liability clause for you at all. It's entirely reasonable for you as a supplier to have your liability limited, especially when I think about the sorts of commercial terms we're talking about, the sorts of fees that we're talking about, you know, what you're actually doing. It's entirely reasonable to have your liability limited when you're providing services to corporates to the value of what you're doing. Don't let them scare you and bully you with that. You know, you can say, well, actually, I know that it's reasonable in a contract of this sort for me to limit my liability to the amount of my fees. So that's one thing. Don't get bullied by those contracts. And they will change those things. When they send them out, they know that a couple of areas they might have to negotiate are limitation of liability, also potentially intellectual property, and always look at the scope of what you're doing. That's really important. You know, if we step back and think, what's going on at the heart of this contract? Well, one, I'm providing a bunch of services. Have they described precisely enough what I'm doing? We don't want any scope creep here. Have we set out what I'm getting paid precisely and how they're paying me and when they're paying me? And is my liability limited? And the next one is what's happening with any intellectual property that I'm bringing to the party. Okay, so that's one thing. Moving back to kind of what your original question was, when we're signing up for things ourselves, one of the most important things, and often we're making a big investment, right? And I've done that as well. And I value my coaches and my coaching, my mentoring so much. But I also see situations where it's very easy to get caught up, again, like that honeymoon period. We're one half of that, you know, falling in love. We've got a coach or a coaching organisation potentially promising us the earth, and they're doing this whole, you know, stack of all the things you're going to get. Firstly, make sure that you have in writing exactly what you're going to get. And don't allow those and I've been there, I know that feeling, but don't allow those rose-tinted spectacles, that feeling of, this is it, I've really found the answer, this is going to get me 6 figures or whatever nonsense they're telling you. Don't let that stop you from just stopping for a moment and thinking, okay, where is that description without all of the marketing fluff of the nuts and bolts of what I'm going to get? Like, how many sessions am I going to get? How long are those sessions? So I've had this really recently with somebody who's absolutely distraught, who signed up for something, and it included getting certain sessions with a top coach, however you define that, but certain one-to-one sessions, and she just assumed that those sessions would be quite chunky, meaty sessions. Well, in fact, those sessions have ended up being half-an-hour sessions. Now, I actually think that's quite common. In my experience, that's quite common, and somebody can cover a lot in half an hour. But that was not her expectation at all. And that sent her on this spiral of just, what have I done? I've signed up for this, I'm not getting what I wanted. And that's just a perfect example of that lack of clarity. So clarity, a clear description, ideally as a kind of schedule to a contract that you're going to be signing, but at the very least, an email setting out what you're getting, how many sessions, how long they are, who they're with, what your access to, you know, any platforms you're getting access to. Don't forget any bonuses. Sometimes those bonuses, you know, feel really big and they can be worth a lot to us. Let me tell you, and I know this from seeing the inside of certain organisations, they kind of count on people forgetting about the bonuses and feeling a bit woolly about the bonuses or not bringing them up. And very often they will not remind you about your bonuses. So get those on the radar, get them in writing, and know exactly what you're signing up for. And any guarantees, this person had signed up for something and was told she was going to get, you know, X times return on investment. And all she had to back herself up were screenshots of slides at a presentation, and that's better than nothing. But I'd much rather you get something in writing in an email. And also, it wasn't clear what that even meant, and the sums didn't add up. And so, she'd definitely been swept along. So getting everything in writing is very clear. It is very important, and clarity around those big phrases when they say, we guarantee this time return on investment. Make sure you know exactly what you've got to do in order to rely on that guarantee. Like, do you need to show that you've done a certain amount of the work? Now, it may be, if they haven't specified that you need to attend a certain amount of things live, catch up, and for them to be able to see that you've caught up, submit any written work. If they haven't told you all of those things, it may be that you're entitled to ask for some kind of refund because they haven't fulfilled the guarantee. But the problem is this: they often have much more cash flow available to them to defend what they are doing than you have money to take things forward. And so again, if there's that uncertainty around it, then they are going to rely on that uncertainty. They're certainly not going to go, oh yeah, okay, actually you're not going to get that 10x return on investment, here's a bunch of cash back. That's not going to happen. So don't allow for any ambiguity. Make sure you know exactly what it is you're getting. That would be my strongest recommendation to you, because even if ultimately there could be case law, there could be an argument you can make, but you are unlikely to be in a position to be able to do anything with that. You're going to be left with, as I mentioned before, a messy load of screenshots of slides and conversations. It doesn't help you to get it sorted.
And I know that often the less ethical, perhaps, people do use legal bullying. They threaten to take you to court. And in fact, actually, there is one coach who... so people have put on reviews online about that, which is why I know about it. So they would do a promise a lot verbally. They would do chemistry calls, and they would promise things in the call, and the person would sign up on the basis of it. The contract was very, very brief, didn't state these things. And this particular, well, several people actually had the same experience. They had signed up to long payment plans because it was an expensive course, realised really quickly they weren't going to get those things, and they attempted to, one person, a couple of them actually got taken to court by that person, and the coach won because they'd signed this contract, and they had no proof that their coach had ever promised these things because it was all verbal.
This, Hannah, is such a good point, because I know we think, oh, it's bullying tactics and it's legal bullying and all of that. And that is one view of it. The other view of it is this business had a written contract in place with you that clearly said, you were committing to making those payments. Now, morally, I don't think, I've seen the situations and it's heartbreaking. So morally, we can have a view of that. But of course, legally, what has a court got to work with? They've got a contract, and that somebody signed up to. There's no evidence of coercion. The coach will have, on the surface, done all of the things they said they were going to do, and everything that's in writing. A bit like I've said, it's just basically taking all of the benefits that I've said that you can have for your business. It's those organisations being savvy enough to do that for themselves, and you end up with a binding contract. It's really scary. And I think sometimes when we sign up for those things, we just think, I don't know, we just have this voice that says, oh, well, if it's not quite right, we'll be able to get out of it, or they won't, make us continue to make those payments. But we've seen, and I know the sorts of examples you're talking about, that actually sometimes that isn't the case. Sometimes they may not have the money to take action, but sometimes they will, and sometimes they actually do. So contracts are serious things, and they should be there to protect both sides. But you need to have a look at it, and don't treat it lightly. Make sure exactly what you want to get out of it is set out unambiguously, factually, so you can say you haven't done this, you haven't done this.
So it sounds like whether you are providing a contract for someone to sign with you or the coach, or with you or the coachee, for example, on both sides, to fully protect yourself, you need to make sure that anything that you sign or get someone to sign spells out in absolute terms for if you have a guarantee, what that guarantee involves specifically, what the deliverables are, if calls, length of calls, number of calls. It's the only way to... Yeah.
Don't forget the bonuses.
Yeah. So what was that?
Don't forget the bonuses, because
And bonuses, yes, and bonuses. Don't forget the bonuses.
Yeah.
What about when people are, now this is this is a term that you will know very well, GDPR.
Yeah.
I know, I mean, thankfully we're a few years on now, and because it was just so confusing and it's died down a little bit, but still, we do need to be legally compliant when we are adding people to our mailing list. So what do we need to be aware of specifically in that area?
Okay, so this is so important now more than ever, because this is not going away, by the way. We all value our data so much, and especially, my God, we've all just taken at the time that we're talking about this, we've all just taken a right battering of our inboxes with Black Friday, which has now become a whole month as far as I can tell. And by the way, I do those promotions as well. We're used to them, but even so, we have to be very careful about how we collect people's data and how we use it. And as we're building our email list, with paid traffic as it is these days as well, our email list is a huge asset to a business. So stop being scared about it and just think about it, turn it on its head a bit and think, I'm building up this great asset for my business. Like, this is the lifeblood in lots of instances of how I'm going to be able to have an evergreen system in place that I'm not going to burn out. I'm going to have a lovely, warmed, nurtured community of people ready to buy my stuff. Like, think about your email list in that way, and think about GDPR is just one of the things that I need to do to make sure that I can really enjoy this beautiful asset for my business. And so in terms of what you're doing, the main thing really is making sure that when people give you their contact details, that you're getting the right consent from them to do what you want to do with that data. What that means is that if you're getting their details from a contact form, for example, and the form says, please give us your details so that we can stay in touch with you. And obviously you want to make it sound as fantastic as an experience as I'm sure it will be. So to enjoy free resources, special offers, keep you in touch with what I'm doing from time to time, please fill in this form. Okay, that is enough on its own to use that information going forward in the way that you said you would use it. So that's, that form does what it says on the tin. Where you have to be a little bit more careful is if you are offering some kind of free gift, and there is a form they're filling in to get that free gift. Now, it might be some kind of downloadable PDF, it might be a discovery call, it might be a free masterclass or something like that, or a free event. Then when they're signing up in order to get that PDF or that discovery session or attend that masterclass. So if you're going to want to take their data and use it generally going forward in order to stay in touch with them, on an ongoing basis, then you need to get separate consent for that. So that's specifically kind of one of the thorny bits about GDPR. Okay, so that's the main thing to get right, is the sort of consent that you're getting when you collect people's personal data. What I would also say is this: remember, because I see small business owners in online communities all the time talking about the most detailed, esoteric points of data protection law that you could ever imagine. And they're doing that because they're thinking, I need to get to the bottom of this before I get my free gift out, before I really start getting in touch with my email list, before I start doing all of the things. And what I would say to you is, remember that that legislation is not there to catch out small business owners like us, provided we are being respectful of people's personal data. So underpinning everything is just making sure that you respect people's personal data. Remember how you feel about when you get bombarded with stuff, or how you'd feel if you gave your data to someone and they passed it to someone else without you knowing, and suddenly you've got a whole other load of stuff coming into your inbox. So just being respectful is the most important thing. Making sure that you've got an up-to-date privacy policy on your website as an absolute minimum. Making sure that you have an unsubscribe button in all of your emails. And if you use an email provider, that will be there anyway. So as long as you're doing that, you can't go too far wrong. Another really practical thing, because some people, a bit like the contracts, some people get really wound up about all of this, and it really keeps their business back. And something that can really help you, and also will put you in good stead if you ever do something a little bit wrong, is just have a folder that you set up on Google Drive or Dropbox, somewhere like that, and call it data protection or data privacy, something like that, doesn't really matter. And have a Google Doc in there that is a working document, and just set out the steps that you have taken to do your best to be compliant and to look after people's personal data in a respectful way. So, just literally put the date, visited the ICO website, look to see if there've been any updates, any trainings you go on, just listening to this podcast, listen to a podcast on legals, try and find out, things that I can do. Any third-party suppliers that you use, especially if they're based in the US, every 6 months, just Google them and see if there's been a big data breach or a scare in relation to them, and just put that on your Google Doc. Did a due diligence on my third-party suppliers. These things do not need to take long at all. Have it as a recurring, half-hour thing in your diary every 6 months, and update the document, and just document the fact that you're updating it. If ever you do anything slightly wrong and the ICO has reason to get in touch with you, if you show them that, you're going to be okay. You're not going to get slammed with a huge fine. And unfortunately, we have people out there that make us really scared about these things. We think, oh my God, I'm going to get that huge fine. If you do those things, and if you act in a way that is respectful of people's personal data, you're basically going to be okay. And don't allow it to stop you getting your stuff out there. Don't allow it to hold you back.
Absolutely. And I think that is such good, that's all amazing advice about GDPR, but it's also good advice about anything, because there are so many things that we don't use as excuses, but become stumbling blocks that we can't get past. There are enough of them already without adding GDPR into the mix.
Spend the whole time procrastinating and all of that malarkey without adding this into it as well. Because you're never going to get to the end of all of those really detailed points about GDPR. You're never going to get there. So just do the sensible stuff, get a bit of help, sort it out quickly, move on.
Absolutely. So my penultimate question is, when we hire people to work for us, like a VA or a designer, what do we need to be aware of regarding that? What legal things pitfalls do we need to avoid?
Yeah, great question. And also, can I just put a shout out for starting to use people as soon as you can, even if it's just for a couple of hours a week, because that's when my business started to go to a whole other level. So make sure you've got something in a simple contract in writing. Don't assume that they'll have one, because they often won't. Also, even if they do, in many instances, it won't cover the things that you need to get covered. It'll be something they've pulled together themselves. So get something that you can use with all of the third-party suppliers that get involved in your business. And one of the main things, again, is clarity and boundaries. Because so many beautiful relationships end up just kind of foundering, because we don't have clarity around expectations. So, and it's such a shame, because we need people in our team. We need them if we're going to do great things in our businesses. So get something to protect the relationship first and foremost. And then there's a few really important things that it will do for you. One is, we often don't realise if any services provider is creating things for us, and there are intellectual property in those things. I'm thinking about things like copy, sales copy, branding. They will retain ownership of the intellectual property in those things unless you have it in writing, even once you've paid them. And I know it feels counterintuitive. You can't believe it's quite true, but it is true. So, and it's not always possible to get the ownership of the intellectual property. It depends what it is. But with those things that I've just mentioned, it absolutely is possible. And you just need to have something in writing explaining that the intellectual property gets transferred to you once they've been paid. And by the way, if they're not happy for that to be the case, then you need to have a conversation about it, don't you? Because you need to know where you stand. And if you've got big plans for your business going forward, if at some stage you're going to want to sell it or sell a part of it or license other people to use the things you've created, that intellectual property is going to be really important. And yet again, you don't want to be stuck in this messy toing and froing. You want to just know clearly that you own the intellectual property. And then you need to cover, there are GDPR points and also tax points, just to make sure that you're protected and doing the things that you need to do. So having a written agreement in place is really important.
Excellent. And finally, I'm very aware of time, and you have shared so much good advice. But this is a really difficult question. If you had to leave us with one piece of legal advice, what would it be?
Okay, one piece of legal advice would be, it's the same point, but it's so important. Get your client contract sorted, because it's going to make you feel so much better. You won't believe how liberating it is and how much more confident you're going to feel really putting your business out there. So that's what I would say. Get that done. It's not the paperwork. It's way more than the paperwork, and it feels great when you do it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. If people want to find you or learn more from you, where can they go?
So I've got a website, theorchardway.co.uk, and if you go on there, no matter where you are in your business journey, there are various ways that I can help you, or you can just sign up for my list to get free hints and resources and for me to stay in touch with you. But there are various ways I can help to suit all different budgets. So if you go to the website, you'll find signposts as to how I can help you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Natasha. It's been so interesting. I've learned so much.
Has it really? Do you mean that?
No, I do. I genuinely do. No, it is really, because it's not just about the law, it's about psychology as well, isn't it? And it's about protecting ourselves and other people too, and good business practice. So yes, I have genuinely, very unlawyery.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.